The message came on a Tuesday. Commander Yuki Tanaka stood in the communications room of the Generation ship Perseverance. She had been listening to the weekly broadcast from Earth, the same way her mother had, and her grandmother before that. For 312 years, humanity's scattered fleet had received these transmissions. They were proof that home still existed. They were proof that Earth still breathed. The voice from the speaker was calm at first. A woman named Dr. Sarah Webb, the communications officer of Earth's global network, spoke about weather patterns and new scientific discoveries. She talked about children playing in parks and musicians creating new songs. Normal things. Beautiful things. Then her voice changed. "We are detecting a coronal event unlike anything in recorded history," Dr. Webb said. Her words came faster now. "The sun. Something is wrong with the sun. We are activating emergency protocols across all continents. Underground shelters are opening. We are doing everything we can." Yuki felt her heart stop. "To all ships of the Exodus fleet," Dr. Webb continued, her voice shaking now. "To all children of Earth who sailed into the stars to find new homes, we want you to know something. Whatever happens here today, we are proud of you. We love." The transmission ended. Static filled the room. Cold, empty static that seemed to swallow everything. Yuki tried to reconnect. She adjusted frequencies. She boosted power to the receivers. She did everything the manuals told her to do and many things they did not. But there was nothing. Only silence. Earth had gone quiet. The news spread through the Perseverance within hours. People gathered in corridors and cafeterias, holding each other, crying, praying. Some refused to believe it. Others had already accepted the worst. The Exodus fleet had once numbered 50 ships, 50 great vessels carrying humanity's hope to distant stars. Over 3 centuries, that number had fallen. Engines failed. Radiation storms killed crews. Some ships simply vanished into the dark between stars, never to be heard from again. Now only 12 remained, scattered across hundreds of light years, all heading toward a planet called Kepler 442b. And now, the world that had sent them forth was silent. Yuki called an emergency meeting of the fleet captains. Their faces appeared on screens around her, each one showing the same fear and confusion she felt. Captain Chen, of the Defiance, Captain Oduya of the Remember, Captain Volkov of the Homebound, 11 other commanders, 11 other ships, all waiting for someone to tell them what to do. "We have to go back," Captain Oduya said. His voice was rough with emotion. "Earth is our home. Our people are there. Earth is 890 light years away," Captain Volkov replied. "The journey would take over 100 years. We might arrive to find nothing but ash, or we might arrive to find survivors who need our help." Oduya shot back. The argument continued for hours. Some captains wanted to press on to Kepler 442b. They said it was what Earth would have wanted. They said the mission had to continue. Others demanded they turn around immediately. They could not abandon their homeworld without knowing its fate. The debate spread to every ship in the fleet. Families argued over dinner tables. Friends stopped speaking to each other. The fleet that had survived so much together now threatened to tear itself apart. It was Dr. Marcus Oyalaran who finally spoke the words that changed everything. Marcus was 94 years old, the oldest person in the fleet. He had been born on the Perseverance, but he had spent his entire life studying Earth. He knew its history better than anyone. He knew its poetry and its pain, its triumphs and its tragedies. He loved it the way a child loves a parent they have never met. He stood before the council, his body frail but his eyes burning with life. "I have listened to all of you," he said. "I have heard the arguments for continuing and the arguments for returning. Both sides speak with logic. Both sides speak with fear. But neither side speaks with memory." He paused, letting his words settle. "We are human," Marcus continued. "Do you know what that means? It means we do not abandon our home. It means we do not forget our dead. It means we face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Earth gave us life. Earth gave us these ships. Earth gave us the stars themselves. And now Earth is silent. We owe it to her to find out why." The council voted the next day. 8 ships chose to continue to Kepler 442b. They would carry on the mission, ensure humanity's survival on a new world, and honor Earth by building a future. 4 ships chose to return: the Perseverance, the Defiance, the Remember, the Homebound. 12,000 souls in total. turning their backs on their destination to chase a signal that no longer existed. Yuki watched through the observation window as the fleet split apart. Ships that had traveled together for centuries now moved in opposite directions. Families were divided. Lovers said goodbye. Children waved at cousins they would never see again. The journey home would take 142 years. Yuki knew she would not live to see Earth. She knew her children might not either. But her grandchildren would. Or their children. Someday, someone from this ship would touch the soil of humanity's birthplace. She made a promise that night, standing alone in the dark, staring at the distant stars. "We are coming home," she whispered. "Wait for us." The engines fired. The Perseverance began its long journey back. And somewhere, 890 light-years away, Earth waited in silence. Alejandra Voss was born 60 years into the return voyage. She never knew Commander Yuki Tanaka, who had died 40 years before Alejandra's first breath. She never heard the last transmission from Earth, except in recordings that made her cry. She never saw the fleet when it was whole, but she knew Earth. She knew it in her bones. Every night since childhood, Alejandra had watched the holographic archives. She saw blue oceans that stretched beyond imagination. She saw mountains covered in white snow. She saw forests so green they hurt her eyes. She saw animals running free across golden plains. She saw cities full of people who walked under an open sky, breathing air that came from nowhere and everywhere. It seemed impossible. It seemed like magic. It was home. Alejandra grew up on the Perseverance, learning to walk in corridors made of metal, eating food grown under artificial lights, breathing recycled air that had passed through 1,000 lungs before hers. She learned to survive on small portions and smile about it. She learned to fix machines with nothing but wire and hope. She learned that every drop of water was precious, that every seed was sacred, that every birth was a miracle, and every death was a tragedy. She also learned that space was trying to kill them. The 4 ships of the returning fleet faced dangers that tested everything they had. In the year 2401, the Remember was destroyed by a shower of tiny rocks traveling faster than bullets. The ship was there one moment and gone the next. 3,000 people, including Alejandra's best friend from childhood, vanished in seconds. There was no funeral. There was no grave. There was only empty space where a ship used to be. The survivors mourned, and then they kept moving. 55 years later, the homebound's reactor failed. The ship began to die, its lights fading, its air growing thin. The Perseverance and the Defiance rushed to help, connecting their vessels with emergency tubes and pulling people across one by one. For 16 days, they worked without sleep. They saved 2,000 souls. But 847 people could not be reached in time. The homebound drifted away into the darkness, a tomb of metal and memory. Alejandra was the captain of the Perseverance by then. She was 73 years old, her hair white, her hands worn from decades of work. She had buried her husband 10 years ago. She had watched her children grow old. She had held her grandchildren as babies and now watched them raise families of their own. Through it all, she never stopped believing. Resources grew thin as the years passed. Food had to be rationed more strictly. The ship's hulls developed cracks that grew harder to repair. Machines that had run for centuries began to fail, one by one. There were days when it seemed impossible that they would make it. There were nights when even the strongest hearts wavered. But humanity adapted. That was what humans did. Engineers created new tools from broken ones. Scientists developed better ways to grow food with less light and water. Artists made beautiful things from scraps of metal and cloth, reminding people that survival alone was not enough. Musicians wrote songs about Earth, about hope, about the children who would someday walk on real grass. Lovers married in small ceremonies and promised to raise families who would see the homeworld. Teachers taught children about a planet they had never seen, keeping the dream alive in young minds. Every generation passed the mission to the next. Every parent told their children the same story. We are going home. We will get there. Hold on. Alejandra was 116 years old when the sensors first detected Sol. She was lying in the medical bay, her body failing, her time running out. Her great-granddaughter, a young pilot named Yuki Voss, named after the commander who had started this journey, ran to tell her the news. "We can see the sun," Yuki said, tears streaming down her face. "Our sun. The sun of Earth. We found it. We found it. Alejandra smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was real. Tell me, she whispered. Yuki described what the sensors showed. A yellow star, 8 light-years away now. A star with 8 planets orbiting around it. A star that had warmed human faces for 1,000,000 years before anyone ever dreamed of leaving. The crew gathered outside Alejandra's room. They sang songs that their great-great-grandparents had sung on the day the fleet split apart. They held hands and cried and laughed and prayed. Alejandra asked for a screen to be brought to her bed. She wanted to see the star herself. When the image appeared, showing that tiny point of light against the infinite darkness, she wept. She called for her family to gather close. I will not see Earth, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But you will. And when you do, I want you to touch the ground for me. Feel the soil between your fingers. Breathe the air. Look up at the sky. And tell Earth. Tell her that her children never stopped coming home. She died 3 hours later, peacefully, surrounded by 5 generations of her family. The fleet flew on. 8 years later, they entered the Sol system. The descendants of those who had turned back 142 years ago finally reached the space they had once fled. They passed Neptune. They passed Uranus. They passed Saturn and Jupiter and Mars. And then they saw Earth. Yuki Voss stood at the observation window, just as her namesake had done so long ago. She stared at the planet below. She began to cry, because Earth was still there. Wounded, changed, wrapped in gray clouds and covered in scars, but still there, and waiting. Lieutenant Commander Jin Reyes had studied Earth his entire life. He knew the names of every ocean. He could draw the shapes of every continent from memory. He had memorized the heights of mountains and the lengths of rivers. He knew where the great cities had stood. New York, Tokyo, London, Cairo, Mumbai. He knew where forests had grown thick and where deserts had stretched wide. None of that prepared him for what he saw. The Perseverance and the Defiance entered orbit around Earth on a cold morning in March 2489. Jin stood at the main observation deck, surrounded by hundreds of crew members who had gathered to see their ancestral home for the first time. The room was silent except for the soft hum of machines and the quiet sound of people breathing. Earth was gray, not the blue and green of the archives, not the beautiful marble that generations had dreamed about. Gray clouds covered most of the planet, thick and heavy and wrong. Where the clouds parted, Jin could see brown wastelands where forests had once stood. He could see impact craters, massive wounds in the planet's surface, scattered across every continent. Coastlines had changed shape, ice caps had vanished. The Amazon, once the greatest forest on Earth, was now a desert. Someone behind Jin began to sob. Others joined. The sound of weeping filled the observation deck. What happened? A young woman whispered. What happened to our home? No one could answer. Jin forced himself to study the details. The impact craters suggested bombardment from space, possibly asteroids redirected by some unknown force, or weapons from a war they knew nothing about. The atmospheric readings showed high levels of dust and ash, explaining the gray clouds. Radiation was present but not deadly. The planet was damaged, maybe dying, but not dead, not yet. As the ships continued their scans, more details emerged. Mars showed signs of old colonies, domes, and structures that had been abandoned decades or centuries ago. Europa, the moon of Jupiter, had strange marks on its ice, patterns that looked like they might have been caused by weapons fire. Something terrible had happened in the Sol system. A war, perhaps, or a disaster, or both. Jin was about to order a closer scan of Earth's surface when his communications officer shouted, "Sir, I am picking up a signal." Everyone turned. The room fell completely silent. "What kind of signal?" Jin asked. "Human," the officer said, her voice shaking. "It is a human voice, very weak, coming from somewhere in Asia." Jin's heart pounded. "Put it through." Static filled the speakers. Then, through the noise, a voice emerged. It was broken and faint, cutting in and out, but the words were clear enough. "Survivors here. 3 million. Underground shelters. Tibet. Please respond. We have been waiting so long. Is anyone there? Please. Is anyone there?" The room erupted. People screamed. They hugged each other. They fell to their knees and cried. After 142 years of wondering, after countless nights of fearing the worst, they had their answer. Earth had survived. Humans had survived. They were not returning to a grave. They were returning to family. Jin grabbed the communications panel with trembling hands. Earth. This is Lieutenant Commander Jin Reyes of the Exodus Fleet Vessel Perseverance. We hear you. Repeat. We hear you. We are in orbit above your planet. Our fleet has returned. The response took several minutes. When it came, it was the sound of people crying. You came back, a woman's voice said through the static. They said you would not. They said you forgot about us. But you came back. We never forgot, Jin said. We are 12,000 people strong. We have food, medicine, technology. We are coming down to help. Hold on. Please. Hold on. Word spread through both ships within the hour. The crew of the Defiance celebrated just as wildly. Planning began immediately. Shuttles were prepared. Medical teams assembled. Food stores were calculated. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone wanted to be part of the landing. Jin selected the first team carefully. Doctors, engineers, diplomats, people who could help, and people who could communicate. He chose representatives from different families, different backgrounds, different generations. This moment belonged to everyone. Commander Dara Okonkwo, the captain of the Perseverance, insisted on leading the mission herself. She was 70 years old, born on the ship, great-granddaughter of Dr. Marcus O'Yalaran, the historian who had first urged the fleet to return. It felt right that she should be the one to touch Earth's soil first. The night before the landing, Dara addressed the fleet over the communication systems. Tomorrow, she said, we complete the longest journey in human history. Our ancestors left Earth 312 years ago, carrying hope in their hearts and courage in their souls. Some of them flew toward new worlds. Some of them turned back. We are the children of those who turned back. We are the ones who refused to let Earth go. She paused, looking at the planet through her window. We do not know what we will find down there. We do not know what horrors our brothers and sisters have faced. But we know one thing for certain. They are not alone anymore. We are here, and we are not leaving. The shuttles launched the next morning. Jin watched through the observation deck as the small vessels descended through Earth's gray clouds. He held his breath as they disappeared from view. Minutes passed like hours. Then the radio crackled. We have landed, Dara's voice said, thick with emotion. We are standing on Earth. The ground is solid. The air is thin but breathable. And there are people here, so many people. They are coming out of the mountain. They are running toward us. They are crying. Jin heard the sounds through the transmission. Voices shouting, laughter, sobbing. The sounds of humans who had been separated for a century and a half, finally reunited. We are home, Dara whispered. We are finally home. Elder Miriam Chen had not seen the sun in 120 years. She had been 7 years old when the sky turned dark. She remembered that day perfectly, even now, even at 127 years of age. She remembered her mother grabbing her hand and running. She remembered the ground shaking. She remembered the screams. She remembered descending into the mountain, into tunnels that went down and down and down, until the sounds of destruction above faded into silence. For over a century, she had lived underground. She had grown up in tunnels lit by artificial lights. She had married a man she met in the food distribution lines. She had raised 3 children who had never felt wind on their faces. She had buried her husband, then her children, then most of her grandchildren. She had watched generations be born and die beneath the rock, waiting for a rescue that most believed would never come. And then the ships appeared in the sky. Miriam was carried outside by her great-great-granddaughter on the day the fleet landed. She was too weak to walk, her body worn down by time and hardship. But she had to see. She had to witness this moment with her own eyes. The gray clouds still covered most of the sky, but there were patches of pale blue visible between them. The air was cold and thin and tasted like dust. The ground was hard and barren, nothing like the green meadows Miriam remembered from childhood. But it was outside. It was the surface. It was the world. The shuttle sat 100 meters away. People in strange suits were stepping out, their movements awkward in Earth's gravity. They were tall and thin, their bodies shaped by generations in space. They looked different. They sounded different when they spoke. Their accents strange and unfamiliar, but they were human. They were family. Miriam reached up with a trembling hand as one of them approached. A young woman, perhaps 20 years old, with dark skin and bright eyes. The woman knelt beside Miriam and took her hand gently. "Hello," the woman said. Her voice was soft. "My name is Zara. I am from the Perseverance. We came from the stars. We came home." Miriam could not speak. Tears ran down her weathered cheeks. "You came back," she finally managed to whisper. "They said you would not. They said we were forgotten. But you came back." Zara held her hand tighter. "We never forgot. We never stopped coming." The reunification was not easy. 3 million survivors had lived underground for over a century. They had developed their own ways of doing things, their own leaders, their own culture. They had suffered in ways the fleet could not imagine: starvation, disease, the constant fear that the tunnels would collapse, the despair of believing they were the last humans in the universe. Some of them welcomed the fleet with open arms. Others were angry. "Where were you?" a man shouted at a gathering between the two groups. "Where were you when the bombs fell? Where were you when we were dying? You ran away. You left us to suffer. And now you come back like heroes?" The fleet representatives tried to explain. They had been 800 light-years away when Earth went silent. They had spent over a century traveling back. They had sacrificed everything to return, but logic did not heal old wounds. Resentment ran deep. The young people, however, refused to carry their elders' pain. A girl named Sun Yi from the underground shelters became friends with a boy named Thomas from the Perseverance. They were both 16. They did not care about who had left and who had stayed. They only cared about building something new together. Sun Yi taught Thomas about Earth's history, the real history, not the stories preserved in ship archives. Thomas taught Sun Yi about the technologies the fleet had developed over centuries of space travel. Together, they dreamed of what they could create. More friendships formed, then relationships, then families. The children of Earth and the children of the stars began to merge into one people. Work began immediately. The fleet's engineers studied Earth's atmosphere and developed a plan. Giant mirrors were constructed in orbit to reflect more sunlight onto the surface. Factories on the ships produced special algae designed to clean the air. Water purification systems were built near the few remaining clean water sources. Seeds preserved in the fleet's vaults were planted in carefully prepared soil. It was brutal work, exhausting work, work that took years and cost lives, but slowly, impossibly, the planet began to heal. The gray clouds grew thinner. More sunlight reached the surface. Temperatures became more stable. Rain began to fall. Clean rain that did not burn the skin or poison the ground. 13 years after the fleet's return, a young botanist named Kenji Okonkwo Chen planted a cherry tree sapling in the open air. The seeds had been preserved in the fleet's vaults for 3 centuries. Waiting for this moment, a crowd of thousands gathered to watch. People from both the ships and the shelters, standing together. The sapling was small and fragile, but it was alive. It was growing under a real sun, drinking real rain, rooted in real earth. Miriam Chen, somehow still alive at 140 years, was brought to see it. She touched the tiny leaves with fingers that had once touched trees before the fall. "Life," she whispered. "There is life again." 2 years later, the first child was born on Earth's surface in over a century and a half. Her name was Hope. She was the daughter of Sun Yi and Thomas, the 2 teenagers who had refused to inherit old hatreds. She was born in a small hospital built where a forest had once stood, under a sky that showed more blue than gray. When she took her first breath, she breathed air that came from the world around her, not from machines. When she opened her eyes, she saw sunlight streaming through a window. When she cried, her parents laughed, because her cry was the sound of the future. The planet was not healed. The work would take generations more. But for the first time since the sky fell, humanity was moving forward, and they were doing it together. Ambassador Kofi Tanaka Voss stood at the window of the United Earth Assembly Hall, looking out at a world his ancestors would not have recognized. The sky was blue, not the pale, sickly blue of the early recovery years, but a deep and brilliant blue that stretched from horizon to horizon. White clouds drifted lazily across it, casting shadows on the green land below. In the distance, a forest covered what had once been a wasteland of ash and dust. Birds flew between the trees, their songs carried on clean wind. It had taken 58 years. 58 years of work and sacrifice and hope. But Earth was alive again. Kofi turned away from the window and faced the assembly chamber. Representatives from every region of the planet filled the seats, waiting for him to speak. There were descendants of the underground survivors, their skin still pale from generations in tunnels. There were descendants of the returning fleet, their bodies now adjusted to Earth's gravity after decades of living on the surface. And there were new arrivals, too. People from the 8 ships that had continued to Kepler 442b, who had finally returned to find their lost siblings thriving. 12 billion humans now lived on Earth and in the orbital stations above it. 12 billion people who had once been scattered across the stars, separated by distance and time and fear. Now they were one family again. Kofi's heritage reflected that unity. His great-great-grandmother had been Commander Yuki Tanaka, who first heard Earth's silence and chose to turn back. His great-great-grandfather had been from the Voss line, captains and pilots who had kept the ships flying through the long journey home. His grandmother had been born in the underground shelters of Tibet. His grandfather had come from Kepler 442b, returning to a homeworld he had never seen. He was a child of all humanity, and today, he would speak for all of them. 142 years ago, Kofi began, his voice carrying through the hall. 4 ships turned back toward a silent world. 12,000 people chose to chase a signal that no longer existed. They did not know what they would find. They only knew that Earth was their home, and they could not abandon it. He paused, looking at the faces before him. They died in that journey. Their children died. Their grandchildren died. Ship after ship was lost to the darkness between stars. Those who survived faced starvation and despair. But they never stopped. They never surrendered. Because that is what humans do. We keep going. We keep reaching. We keep believing that tomorrow can be better than today. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. When they finally arrived, they found a wounded world. They found 3 million survivors living underground, people who had endured a century of darkness and fear. Some welcomed them, others blamed them. The road to unity was long and painful. Old wounds do not heal easily. But the young refused to carry old hatreds. They reached across the divide. They built new lives together. They planted seeds in poisoned soil, and dared to believe those seeds would grow. Kofi gestured toward the window. Look outside. See what those seeds became. Forests cover continents that were once ash. Oceans have returned to blue. Children play in parks, running under open skies, breathing clean air. Cities rise again. Not like the old cities that scarred the land, but new cities that live in harmony with the world around them. We have learned from our mistakes. We have built something better. He walked to the center of the chamber, where a small table held a simple object, an old recording device, preserved for centuries. Today, we dedicate a monument to those who made this possible. The Silence Memorial orbits above us, built from the hulls of the ships that carried humanity home. Inside, every name is inscribed. Every person who died in the Exodus, every person who perished in the shelters, every person who gave their life so that we could stand here today. He picked up the recording device. This contains the last transmission from Earth before the silence. For 142 years, it ended mid-sentence. The words were, "To all children of Earth, we love." He pressed play. The ancient voice of Dr. Sarah Webb filled the chamber, speaking words that had haunted generations. "To all children of Earth, we love." The recording cut off. Silence filled the room. Kofi looked up, his eyes bright with tears. For decades we wondered how that sentence ended. What was Earth trying to tell us before the sky fell? What final message did they want us to carry into the stars? He set down the device and spread his arms wide. We know now. The answer is simple. The answer was always simple. He spoke the words slowly, letting each one land. "To all children of Earth, we love you." Someone in the assembly began to cry. Others joined. Soon the entire chamber was weeping, not with sadness, but with something deeper. Relief, gratitude, love. "And here is our answer," Kofi continued. "Our answer to those who sent us forth. Our answer to those who waited in darkness. Our answer to the universe itself." His voice rose. "We love you too." And we never stopped. The applause began softly and grew into a roar. People stood from their seats. They embraced each other. Strangers held hands. Old enemies smiled at each other through tears. Kofi stepped back, watching the celebration unfold. This was what humanity was meant to be. Not scattered, not divided, not fighting over resources or land or power. Together, united, reaching for each other across every distance. Later that evening, Kofi visited the memorial in orbit. He floated through its corridors, reading names etched into walls that had once been ship hulls. So many names, so many lives given. He stopped at one section and traced his fingers over familiar letters. Yuki Tanaka, Alejandro Voss, Marcus Oyelaran, Miriam Chen. Thousands of others. Thank you, he whispered. We made it. We kept your promise. Earth lives. Through the window, he could see the planet below. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, city lights beginning to glow as the sun set. And somewhere down there, children who had never known war were playing in grass their great-grandparents had only dreamed of. The old recording played softly in the background, broadcast throughout the memorial on this day of remembrance. To all children of Earth we love. And now, at last, echoing back across the centuries, the response, we love you too. And we never stopped. Humanity had come home, and they would never leave again.